The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Yeah.
Did that, put him in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Comes to LeBron, he takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive!
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise! Yeah! Oh! Here we go now! 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 Check it out!
Welcome in. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. From Studio A in Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, we're coming at you with live sports talk for the next 2 hours. We are back after some technical difficulties, and we are live. Alongside David Eickholt and Scott Ayers, I'm Matt Reynoldson. Thanks for joining us. We got a stacked lineup for you today. David, what's coming up in hour one?
Well, Nebraska basketball is Michigan State's Achilles heel yet again, beating the Spartans for a third straight time. Is the Big Red becoming a force to be reckoned with? Later on, we'll discuss the national landscape of college basketball and look ahead to what could be a crazy March. Scott, what do we have for hour two?
Well, in hour two, Michael Grandinetti will be here to discuss Brady versus Manning for the 17th and possible final time when the two play on Sunday in Denver. And a pair of Heisman Trophy winners face off in Charlotte. Who will advance to the Super Bowl? We'll also talk parity in the NBA and talk about the MVP race. But first, Wednesday night was quite a scene in East Lansing.
There it is. 4 straight wins and a signature upset over the 11th ranked team in the nation on the road. Husker fans believe again. Michigan's coming to the vault tomorrow, and it's gonna be rocking. Guys, is this team showing flashes of 2014?
In all honesty, this team, you know, you can say they're showing flashes of 2014, but I like to just have them be two separate basketball teams. They're two different identities. In 2014, it was Siobhan Shields and Teran Petaway. Those were the faces of this team. Now, in 2016, you're looking at a very more diverse group of players in Benny Parker, in Siobhan Shields, and Andrew White III, the sharpshooter. But you have players like Jack McVeigh coming off the bench, and really knocking down threes. This team has a much stronger threat from the outside, and I think that's what really helped them against the Michigan State Spartans.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think one of the biggest differences right now is I think Siobhan Shields is finally coming into his own.
Yeah.
If you look at the stats from last game, Andrew White, he fouled out. He struggled with fouls all game, only had 7 points. But Siobhan Shields took over. He finished with 28 points and made the big shots. Jack McVeigh made some key baskets down the stretch. And Glenn Watson is really starting to impress me, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing out of him.
Let's talk a little bit about this performance, because it was evident that this just wasn't Nebraska ball catching fire, playing a fluky-type game. They didn't play at their best. They didn't play your typical, upset on the road. You catch fire, you shoot really hot. They were taking good shots, playing good defense, and this team has the scoring prowess to make it something different than it's ever been. I think, as far as this season goes, and I'm probably speaking too soon, but I think the days of these enormous scoring droughts are behind us. This team played, and Michigan State didn't play badly either. Michigan State didn't lose the game. It was an average game, and Nebraska went toe-to-toe with Michigan State and was able to knock them off.
Yeah, this was basically two heavyweights exchanging blows. No team really had control of the game throughout. Michigan had leads at different periods of times, but, those bench players, Jack McVay knocked down a huge three to tie the game at 58, and, Siobhan Shields had a sensational game, maybe his best of the season. With Andrew White the third out, Siobhan Shields stepped up and took on the scoring load and hit a key shot to give the Huskers a 4-point lead late in the game. And that's just been what this team has been all about. They've been clutch the last 4 games, and now their schedule gets tough with Michigan, Purdue, and Maryland, their next 3 games. And even if they can win 2 of those 3 games, that will be a huge testament to this basketball team.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, me and Matt Harsey were talking about this game earlier in the week, and over the next 4-game stretch, and we said if we win 1, okay, we need 1 out of the 4. If we win 2, we're in good shape. If we win 3, we are really looking at being a top half of the Big Ten finishing, and I think that'd be a good showing going into the Big Ten tournament. And if we can do that, then we're talking NCAA tournament appearance. I'll tell you what, Michigan State, they did make 11 of 18 threes, but the difference in the game was for Nebraska, obviously Siobhan Shields and his clutch baskets, but Bryn Forbes has been struggling for Michigan State. He was 1 of 8, only 1 for 5 from 3. Foul troubles. He has just not been the same ever since he dropped 32 points against Oakland earlier in the year. He has just not been the same player. He's not even a starting caliber player for Michigan State at this point. But Nebraska, they're on the rise. They just need to keep looking forward 1 game at a time, and, we'll see where this game goes.
Well, Tim Miles did mention in his post-game press conference, he did speak with the Michigan State reporters that were interested to talk to him after the upset win. He talked about you don't let Bryn Forbes get a clean 3 off. That's what he talked to his guys all week in practice about. And Forbes with 3 points, 1 for 8 shooting, didn't have a great game. He's been struggling in this Michigan State slump. It was the defense. If you watch the game, you can see it was the defense, and he didn't have great shots. It wasn't great shot selection. It's Benny Parker on him all the time.
Yeah, and the defense has been key, and that's one of Tim Miles' crunch time teaching points is playing great defense. Late in that game, Denzel Valentine, when he hit that 3 with 6 seconds left,
that was nuts.
It wasn't an open 3. It wasn't like he had an easy shot. He fell to the ground and just threw up a prayer. And all throughout the game, the defense just played hard and smart basketball. Ty Webster had a couple clutch steals late in the game. Fortunately, he wasn't clutch at the free throw line. But this is a basketball team who really thinks that they can take on anyone after taking down Michigan State, who now has lost 3 games in a row.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Ty Webster did end up making a few key drives to the basket and buckets. But I'll tell you what, it's like LeBron the crunch. He just could not make his free throws near the end. That nearly cost the team the game. But I'll tell you what, I have been happy with the offense that Nebraska has been showing. But let's take a step back for a second. They put 90 against Rutgers. Okay. They put 84 at Minnesota. Okay. Bottom 2 teams of the Big Ten. If we want to say that we're past the scoring droughts, let's see how we do against Purdue, because Purdue's the best defensive scoring team in the Big Ten, and how we do against Maryland. If we can put up over 70 to 75 points against those teams, then I'm ready to say that we are, a legitimate good offensive team that can back it up with some decent defense. Because Nebraska, at the end of the day, they will mess up the Big Ten standings somehow.
Well, the thing is, if this team wanted to, they could have put probably 110 on Rutgers and 120 on Minnesota.
True.
They were up. They had They had over 80 points with 9 minutes left in the game against Minnesota. But it's clear. I think it's been clear this year, especially in this 4-game stretch, the 4-game win streak, that this team can score with the best of them. They were the first team all year to shoot 50% or better against Michigan State. Is the ability to score the key to the success of this team, or is it something else?
I think it starts with the defense. And some of the games that they've lost, Iowa, they gave up 77 points, gave up 81 points to Northwestern, 83 to Creighton, 77 to Miami. Those are games where if they would have played a little bit stronger defense, they would have had a better chance of winning. Obviously, offense is huge, but the best offense comes from great defense. And we saw that last night. Off of steals and turnovers, they were able to capitalize. And I think that if they can continue to play this feisty and fierce defense, that they're going to be a problem to reckon with for these other Big Ten teams.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. Defense leads to offense. Points off turnovers will be a huge stat, I think, over the next few games for this Nebraska team, because if you can put pressure on them when you're on the defensive side of the ball, then that team feels double the pressure when they're on the defensive side of the ball because you can stop them. Now they have to stop you. And I think that could lead to some very, very good offensive plays, get Andrew White open for a three, let Ty Webster drive the hoop, let Siobhan Shields get to the hoop, maybe take a mid-range jumper. It's just it opens up so much more when Nebraska plays good defense.
So we've diagnosed kind of what how key the offense is to this team. But what's the biggest difference than the Nebraska ball team we saw just 3 weeks ago? And this team that's on a roll, that's playing with the best of them, it feels like they're catching fire but not playing out of their minds. It feels like they're becoming the basketball team that they all have the potential to be. What's the biggest difference?
I think the biggest difference for me, at least, is Glenn Watson Jr. Glenn Watson, after the Iowa game, he struggled against Iowa. He only had 6 points. The last 4 games, 12 points, 8 points, 17 points, and 13 points. And he's shooting over 50% from the field in those last 4 games. He's coming into his own element. He's playing against, Big Ten competition. He's distributing the ball decently. And here's the thing. Only 4 turnovers combined in the last 4 games. He's really coming into his own, and he's really starting to develop into a good point guard, especially he's farther along as a freshman than I could have expected him to be. But I think the better he gets, the better the offense is going to run, and the more feisty this team will be.
And he's not scared to shoot anymore, is the thing. He's taking the shots. There was a beautiful floater. It was in transition, but he just stepped back and just knocked it down. He's not scared to shoot anymore. He's becoming that ESPN top 100 recruit that he was. And we expect these freshmen to all come in and look like Ben Simmons. And it's just not going to happen. They need some time to gel. And I think Glenn Watson and Ed Morrow are really looking to gel here. Scotty, let me ask you this. Is Glenn Watson staking a claim to be one of the best point guards in the Big Ten Conference?
Honestly, right now, he is playing sensational basketball. There were a couple times where, I think early on in the season, and Tim Miles said this, that these young freshmen in Morrow and Glenn Watson and Jack McVeigh, the freshmen and sophomores, they first have to learn how to lose before they can learn how to win. And I think they learned that in the Northwestern and Indiana games where they led for a while and then blew a second-half lead. In these later games, obviously Morrow is still trying to get his feet wet, but Glenn Watson, my goodness, he's taking the open pull-up jumpers. He's not afraid to score, and he's finally coming into his own. I think when he plays these tougher teams, such as Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, if he can keep his confidence high and understand his role on this team, he can definitely be one of the top players in the Big Ten.
And I agree. This is not a knock against him. This is just my opinion on the Big Ten point guards in general. The Big Ten's really not a point guard-dominated conference outside Melo Trimble.
Yeah.
And I'd put Mike Gazelle, not in Trimble category, but Mike Gazelle's a solid point guard. But, other than that, I really can't think of that man because Michigan State strength, Tum Nairn isn't really that impressive.
Bryn Forbes is serviceable as a point guard.
When he's not playing, like he has been the past 5 or 6 games.
Correct.
But, for right now, I'd put him in the top 4, top 5 as in Big Ten conference player now. And I think that's a great mark for him. If he can keep up the level of play he's been at, I see no reason why he can't come in next year and legitimately be a top 4 point guard that people know about going into the season next year.
Yeah, and there's a few senior point guards that are making waves in the Big Ten. Spike Albrecht, still at Michigan.
He actually quit the team.
Oh, well,
yeah, he due to injuries he quit the team.
Well then,
who did?
Spike Albrecht.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll preview another player that might not be there for Michigan a little bit later. But as far as Glenn Watson goes, he's a heady player, and he's the first player in a long time that's been able, for one of Tim Miles' teams, that's been able to single-handedly break a press. He gets it. And Tim Miles, his teams have always had trouble against the press. This is what Nebraska basketball needed. Other than a big man, and Tim Miles still jokes about that, but it's what Nebraska ball needed was a good point guard, a leader that's not really trying to take over the game. He knows his place, yet he's not afraid to shoot, and I think that's a great balance for this team. Let's talk about Michael Jacobson a little bit. Is the progression of him, he's a true freshman from Waukee, Iowa, is the progression of Jacobson as a player and as a center making up for the lack of a true post player?
You know, this team, if there's one thing they struggle in, is they don't have a true post player. And Jacobson did a quality job in that Michigan State game, but both him and Morrow are really going to have to develop in these, maybe not in this season, but they're going to have to develop this season, to truly become great post players for the rest of their careers, because right now they just don't have the experience as these other Big Ten studs that you see on Purdue and Michigan State and Michigan and all those teams. Because right now it's a very young position for these Nebraska Cornhuskers, and quite frankly, they've struggled so far in the season. Morrow gets in foul trouble too often to be a consistent player right now, because both him and Hammond, Morrow averaging 14 minutes a game and Hammond only 11. These guys are really going to have to keep on developing, because right now they just haven't played the roles that I think Coach Tim Miles would have wanted them to so far.
We interrupt with breaking news. The Cavaliers have just fired head coach David Blatt. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our NBA segment in the second hour, but this is shocking news from ESPN. Sources say Yahoo Sports and Brian Windhorst report that the 30-11 Cavaliers fired head coach David Blatt in just his second season. And with that, we'll go to commercial. When we come back, we're talking more Nebraska ball. Michigan coming into the vault Saturday. We'll talk about if they can pull it off. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Woo! Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court to do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Nebraska will tip off against Michigan at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And don't be surprised if the vault line becomes a fault line. Get it? Like an earthquake? No? All right, that was pretty lame. Anyway, PBA should be approaching 15,000 strong tomorrow. Can Nebraska pull the upset over a Michigan team that's receiving votes in the national polls?
I mean, at this rate, is it really an upset at this point? Because honestly, I don't know what's an upset anymore in college basketball. If you look at the past couple weeks especially, I mean, over the last 10 days, 22 of the top 25 teams have lost.
Right. Well, we'll talk about that in our next segment, our full college basketball segment. But the last time Michigan visited Pinnacle Bank Arena, they handed Nebraska its only home loss of the 2013-2014 season, albeit in controversial fashion. Does that loss motivate this current team?
I think it's going to motivate the guys who were on that team in 2014, in that 2014-2015 season. Siobhan Shields, if he plays like the way he did against Michigan State, Michigan's going to have a tough time defending him. This is a Michigan team who's 4-2 in the conference, 14-5 overall, a talented team, but they're coming off only a 5-point win against Minnesota. Minnesota really giving them all that they could handle. I'm excited to watch this game. I think it's going to go back and forth, but it's really going to come down to the play of Glenn Watson. Is he going to step up once again? And Jack McVay, is he going to be able to come through off the bench? And the bench, it's going to be bench versus bench. Is Nebraska's bench going to be deep enough in this game in order for the Huskers to get their fifth straight win?
I'll tell you what. I think the key for Nebraska is how much can they contain Zach Irvin and Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson is a tall guard, great handles. He's averaging about 12 points a game, but he's got 51.5% from three, and he can launch it over the smaller guards of Nebraska. So I think the key is, can we slow him down enough in order to get the victory? So I don't know. And also update that Karis LeVert actually might be out for the season. Last time I heard, that leg injury is still nagging him. So, but honestly, I think Michigan's a better team without Karis LeVert. They move the ball better. It's not so star-centered. Because when Karis LeVert was playing, it was more so, we're going to run the offense through Karis. We're going to let him drive. We're not going to do that many plays, a lot of ISO plays. But now that he's out, you got Derek Walton Jr., Zach Irvin, Aubrey Dawkins, and Duncan Robinson all moving the ball around the perimeter, and they're making open shots. 50% of the shot attempts for Michigan this year from three-point land, and they are a very good team from there.
And Zach Irvin played very well in Michigan's win Wednesday night against Minnesota. Do you think he is the new Karis LeVert?
I'm not going to put him in the same category as Karis LeVert. Because let's put it this way. I did not mean to knock Karis LeVert by any means. He is a great player. Great passer, good rebounder, decent defender, and he can shoot the ball very well. I mean, he's 51% from the field, 45% from 3, and 80% from the line. But, he's still got ways to go in order to get Karis LeVert level, because Karis LeVert's a legitimate top 15 pick in the NBA draft this next year.
Let's talk about since it is assumed that he will not be playing tomorrow at Pinnacle Bank Arena, what kind of matchup does that avoid Nebraska in having to make? Who's freed up to do more things offensively and defensively because Karis LeVert is not playing?
I think they would put Andrew White on him. They're very, very similar, I feel like. Although I feel like Karis LeVert does have a little bit more of a shake and bake moves, and he can get to the basket a little bit better than Andrew White. But in terms of they run plays through them, they can spot up, shoot, all that, I think that frees up Andrew White to be able to get off more open shots unless they move Duncan Robinson onto White. Then that's going to be a really tough matchup both ways for White. But if that happens, you know what? Let Shields take over like he did last game.
And that's the beauty of Nebraska ball right now. If Andrew White does have that tough matchup, Siobhan Shields is going to be able to just do anything at will. And on the other hand, if Andrew White has an easier matchup, he's going to try to get off that slump he had against Michigan State, fouling out, in the second half. Really didn't have the game he wanted to. But regardless, this is a Michigan team who's only allowing 64 points per game and are scoring 77 points per game. So Nebraska, both on offense and defense, are really going to have to play tough if they want to win this one today.
And I'll tell you what,
not today, but tomorrow.
I'll tell you what. Here's the thing. People can get very worried about, Andrew White. Oh, he's in a struggle. Is he going to bounce back from it? Let me put your mind at ease. It's not always a bad thing when star players struggle, because that means everyone else can step up and develop their game even more confidence-wise and game-wise when you still beat a quality team. Because Michigan State's still a quality team. I don't think anyone's naive enough to say they're not. They're still a very good basketball team. But when you have all those role players stepping up, that just improves their confidence. And once Andrew White comes back and the other players still have their confidence at that level, I think it's a very dangerous combination for whoever has to play against Nebraska next.
And you can say the same thing for Michigan, which is interesting, about all their role players stepping up in the absence of Karis LeVert. But Michigan's leading rebounder is 6'1" guard Derek Walton Jr. How key is winning the rebounding battle in this game?
Well, it all starts actually with offensive rebounds. Nebraska not only is going to have to be strong when they're playing defense and get defensive rebounds, but on the other hand, try to get 2 or 3 opportunities scoring-wise, because it just opens up the court, especially if players are crashing for the boards. If Huskers can get offensive rebounds, I think it's really going to help their cause in this game.
I 100% agree, and I think another key thing that Nebraska needs to focus on is shut down Aubrey Dawkins. Now, he's not a big-time name. People really don't know about him. He's only averaging about 8 points, 3 rebounds a game for Michigan. But I have seen this man go off on tears offensively and rebounding the basketball, and he's extremely athletic. If Nebraska can buckle down and box out and win by fundamentals, because let's put it this way, Michigan's a very athletic team. You don't get sick. Not all players are 6'1" can average 5.5 rebounds a game. I mean, he's extremely athletic. So if we can just box out effectively and just stick to what we know in the fundamentals of basketball, I think we are in a very, very good spot.
Well, the thing is, we were beaten up inside by big men like Northwestern's Derek Pardon and Indiana's Thomas Bryant. Michigan doesn't have that big man presence with their leading rebounder being a 6'1" guard. I think Jacobson will be able to get in there, get some rebounds. Morrow, White and Shields getting down there as well. This might be the first game where Nebraska does have a distinct height advantage as far as the players that are seeing time on the floor. Scotty, what do you think about that?
I think this is actually going to be an advantage, obviously, to the Huskers, because this is a very undersized Nebraska team, so finally they're going to have a bit of a height advantage. Is that going to yield any results for the Huskers? We'll find out. But more importantly, it might help them out in terms of rebounding, and if that's the case, I think the Huskers are going to be very thankful for that advantage.
Again, if we can buckle down, box out effectively, and just not foul, and draw over the back fouls, I think Nebraska is in a very, very, very good spot to win. But again, rebounding will be a big part of this game. I still think the biggest key of the game is containing Duncan Robinson and shutting down all the players, the role players from Michigan. I think we have a good win. I think it'll be a really, really entertaining game.
What are some other keys to the game besides winning that rebounding battle? Because I know that's big.
Yeah.
And, getting those second chance points, avoiding Michigan having those second chance points. What are some other keys to the game as far as what can Nebraska use to pull off this win?
Honestly, I think it starts with Andrew White III and Siobhan Shields. How can they not only get their team involved, but get themselves involved in the game early on? I think Andrew White's really going to want to try to just have a great game against Michigan, and I think it starts with Siobhan Shields passing and being a generous ball player. I think you see that a lot with him driving in the paint and kicking it out to McVeigh or Andrew White or whoever, because that's just something Siobhan Shields knows he can do. Defenses acknowledge the talent he has, and because of that, it's going to leave players open on the outside.
I'll tell you who I'd love to see a big game from. There's two players I'm particularly looking at for Nebraska. Because of the lack of size for Michigan, I'd love to see Ed Morrow just have a breakout game, and I think this is a really, really good opportunity for him. And also Jack McVeigh. Jack McVeigh, obviously, here's the thing. He's a really good – his stats don't show it. He is a good shooter. He has a great stroke. If he's open, I have confidence he'll knock it down. And I think, 6'7", they're going to have a 6'1", 6'2 guy if Duncan Robinson's not guarding him. 6'1 guy is going to be guarding Jack McVeigh. So Jack McVeigh can pull the trigger, and he should have the green light this game, I think. So I think if Ed Morrow can have the best game of his Big Ten career, which obviously probably isn't that hard yet, but it'd be a good confidence booster for him. And if Jack McVeigh can, I think, score over 10 points, I think Nebraska is in a really, really good spot.
Well, who would be proud of this team is former Nebraska basketball player Tyronn Lue, who has just been promoted to the Cavaliers head coach. More on that in our NBA segment in the second hour. But who that has been under the radar needs to step up in this game to win?
I'll tell you what. I wouldn't call us under the radar, but I think this is the biggest X factor defensively for the Cornhuskers. Obviously, it's Benny Parker. It'll be interesting to see who he lines up against, if he's going to be guarding Zach Irvin or Derek Walton Jr., because if he can shut down one of them, another big key, if he can shut down Derek Walton, I think we're in a really, really good spot to win.
I'm going to talk about a different guard in Ty Webster, a guy who was a starter at the beginning of the season, kind of slowed down. They had him coming off the bench as a 6th, 7th man, but he's really come into his own, shooting the ball and playing defense. He had a couple big steals against Michigan State. He's going to have to play that lockdown defense once again against Michigan. If he can do that and stroke from the field, I think the Huskers are going to be doing well.
I would like to look at a player like Ed Morrow to step up in this game. I think he can get down there and be physical with a very guard-heavy Michigan team. He can be an X factor by, getting in there, boxing out, and maybe throwing a few elbows. It's that type of physical presence that will return Nebraska to where it needs to be from a physical dominance standpoint. Nebraska has not been known in previous years to really have that guy inside that can bully around in there, like an A.J. Hammonds from Purdue. So I think if Ed Morrow can be that guy in this game, it's a big help.
And I 100% agree. And this is not a knock against Morrow or Jacobson, but at the end of the day, Nebraska does need to get a big post player. Because here's the thing. Morrow has a lot of potential. Jacobson is showing flashes of having some really good potential. But, at the end of the day, they're not Brandon. I don't know if you guys remember Brandon Dawson back at Michigan State a couple years ago. He was only 6'6 and a half, 6'7", and he led the Big Ten in rebounding. I don't see either of them being able to do that. They don't really have the explosive leaping ability that Dawson had. So I think if we can score a 6'10", 6'11 guy over the next year or two in recruiting, I think we're going to be a lot better off. But obviously, if they have a big game today, it'll be tomorrow. It'll be a good step in the right direction.
And for Morrow, he has such great potential. The problem is whenever he's on the floor, he already has 3 fouls within the first, 15 seconds, and that's just his problem right now. He has to go straight up when playing defense and just be smart with the basketball when playing in the paint. And I think he truly can be a great big man for Nebraska, but he's really shooting himself in the foot with the foul trouble.
Let's look at what Ed Morrow can do for a team that just needs a forward. Doesn't necessarily need him to be that post presence because he's undersized. He's 6'7". He's not gonna go up. He's not gonna jump anybody out of the gym. But they need him underneath there to really be a elbow to elbow guy. Running up to the elbows, being able to hit those mid-range 10-footers, being able to play defense on a post and rotate to the outside to cover somebody like that. And I think he has the athletic ability to do that. We'll see if he's able to blossom in that way.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Here's what Morrow needs to do. He needs to become a bruiser because when I played basketball, here's what I was always taught. It's not about the height. It's not about the jumping ability. It's about who wants the ball more and can you box out effectively. That's what Morrow needs to work on. And I think people are going to be blown away by the jump we're going to see in him next year because I think he's still adjusting the way you play college basketball defense in terms of fouling and all that. Because I've seen there's multiple other players in the Big Ten and even the country that have struggled with that same thing. But the next year they're blowing people away with just their potential. So I think Ed Morrow's going to be a 9 points, 6.5 rebound game next year.
Let's look big picture here. How big is this game tomorrow in cementing the momentum this Nebraska ball team has already created?
I think it's extremely important simply because of the next 2 games. If they can get away with a win against Michigan, then they're going at Purdue, which is an extremely tough place to play. And Purdue's got 3 big guys, all legitimate NBA talent, and they're playing a top 10 team in Maryland the game after. I think in terms of having confidence going into the game, I think it's huge.
And, coming off an upset victory like they did against Michigan State, you can sometimes have those hangovers in a sense where, you feel good, you feel great, and then you just kind of get lazy in your next game. Some teams tend to get blown out. So Nebraska just has to continue what they did against Michigan State. They have to continue to play smart, focused basketball. And even if they do lose against Michigan, you have to make sure to limit the damage. Don't get blown out by 20 points.
Yeah.
Make it a game. If they can make it a game, it'll give them still confidence against Purdue and Maryland.
Just keep it one game at a time, and I believe Tim Miles has to have this team not have that hangover from Michigan State. Tim Miles needs to instill, listen, that was a great win, but now we need to move on. One game at a time mentality, and I think we have a very, very good chance to pull off another upset over the next 3 games and finish in the top half of the Big Ten if we keep the momentum going.
And Miles I heard Miles quoted earlier today on 93.7 The Ticket, and he said he doesn't have too much of a problem reeling this team in and reminding them that it's a game by game thing. He has them watch film. Mike Welch asked him what he does to keep this team reeled in, and he said, I have them watch film and I tell them what they did wrong. He builds this team up by tearing him down, and that sounds negative, but it's all what a good coach does. And I think he's really gotten a hold of this team and where they want to go, and he's not letting them look too far ahead. They're a young team. 4 true freshmen are seeing very significant playing time, and I think that's what these freshmen need to not hit that February slump.
Here's the thing, and we know with Ed Morrow and Glenn Watson obviously being top 100 players and all that, they in high school I feel like they were kind of coddled. They were focusing on the positive things because they were so good and dominant at that level. I think it's a good thing that if Tim Miles is mostly pointing out the negatives instead of the positives, I think that's only going to build them up and make them better players. So if Tim Miles is going about things like that, I have 0 complaints.
Yep, and Nebraska ball needs to find this home moxie that they've lost. I feel like they lost last year to Incarnate Word, lost this year to Samford at home. They don't feel as formidable at home, and they didn't until that blowout against Minnesota where they were up by 38 points with 9 minutes left in the game. Let's hope that was a turning point for this team at home, especially because 2 years ago we were spoiled. 15-1 at home, just looking absolutely unstoppable, taking down a top 10 Wisconsin team before making the NCAA tournament. And if they get that home moxie back, a team like this, the sky is just the limit.
And I agree. I think here's the thing. It all starts with the fans and having them go absolutely bananas in the stadium. I think that's the only way that we can build this team back up in terms of getting that home court advantage back. Because if the players know that you're going to show up and you are going to be rowdy and loud, that is only going to pump them up, and then they'll want to do more because you're doing more. It sounds really weird, but I've seen it too many times for me not to believe it. And I feel like if people show up against Michigan and Maryland, I think we have a lot. I think we'll get right back. If we win one of those two games and fans sell out, I think we're going to be good.
And, that's the beauty of Nebraska sports is the fan base is very loyal. And quite frankly, there's not a whole lot to do besides attend the sporting events. That's the nice thing of not having a pro sports team. That's what the Huskers offer, are technically the pro sports team to a lot of fans. And I think the fans have been great in attendance at PB8 the last few years. Obviously, over breaks, it's hard to get student attendance up higher.
That's at any school, though,
That's
too.
at any school.
Yeah.
And, that was when Northwestern and Indiana came to town. But over these next few weeks and months, Huskers have to be stern at home. They're going to have Purdue come and Ohio State. Those are two games that are going to be huge. Also, Maryland and Rutgers. Those are all games that the Huskers really need to try to win at home.
I feel like if people show up like they did against Michigan State and Wisconsin a few years ago, if they show that way against Maryland, I think we pull the upset against Maryland. My bold prediction: if the fans show up and are rowdy as that, I think we can pull off the upset.
Well, no doubt Pinnacle Bank Arena will be rocking tomorrow. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the national landscape. Does anybody want to be number one? We'll discuss who we think deserves the top spot after the break. This is the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. In the modified words of the great Slim Shady, will the real number one please stand up? 5 number one teams have fallen this season, and we're not even into February yet. Let's look at another crazy week in college basketball. Oklahoma was number one for just a few hours before they went to Ames, Iowa, where Hilton Magic struck again. The Cyclones had 3 players go for 20-plus points in their first win over a number one team in 57 years. Kansas was absolutely flattened in Stillwater on Tuesday night. The defense disappeared in the second half, and an Oklahoma State team that's struggling to remain over 500 beat Kansas by 20. Xavier got outshot and outclassed by Georgetown at home. The Hoyas shot over 50%, and Xavier couldn't overcome a double-digit second-half deficit. West Virginia fell flat at home in a loss to Texas, shooting just 34% from the free throw line.
8 of 23.
8 of 23 on free throws. And then Nebraska ball going into East Lansing and taking down number 11 in the USA Today poll, number 10, Michigan State. So who deserves to be number one?
Right now, I don't think it's a question. I think North Carolina should be number one in the country. You look at the resume. They're 17-2. They have wins against Maryland and Syracuse. Okay, Syracuse. It's still
they did beat Duke, and so yeah, that's the only argument I'm making for Syracuse right now.
Yeah,
good road win against Duke.
But I mean, Jim Boeheim was also out for the first 9 games. I think that's a big factor in it. Anyway, North Carolina is finally fully healthy. Marcus Page was out when they lost against Northern Iowa, and Texas. I think Texas is a dark horse in the NCAA tournament, in my opinion, because they can pull off the upsets, and they are not a bad team. But listen, North Carolina's got Kennedy Meeks back, and that is a huge, huge, huge part of North Carolina and what they do. Bryce Johnson is playing out of his mind. as of late. And Marcus Page is one of the best clutch shooters and best leaders in the country at the point guard position. So right now, not close. North Carolina's the best team in the country.
I think North Carolina is the best team in the country. I don't know if it's fair to say it's not close because this is probably the most even we've seen the NCAA be in quite some time. The weaker teams are finally getting better, and that's kind of the beauty of college basketball. There's so much talent that, some guys who usually back in the day would just signed to the big powerhouses, they're going to the smaller schools such as, Northern Iowa, Wichita State, those kind of schools. And, North Carolina, they have great quality wins against UCLA, Maryland, and Syracuse, but really only time will tell who the best team is in the country. No team has proven to me by far that they're the best team in the country. Marcus Page was out against Northern Iowa, but as of right now, I haven't been convinced by any basketball team this season that they are truly number one and deserve to be number one.
And the only reason why I say by far is because this is the first time North Carolina is healthy, and I've seen these players play over the years and multiple times together. They are good if they are fully healthy. That's why I say by far right now, but only time will tell. So,
North Carolina, it's a big stretch in any statement to say he's doing it like Michael Jordan. But Bryce Johnson is doing it like Michael Jordan. And this is a stacked North Carolina team. But don't forget the teams that are breathing down their neck. Villanova is 17-2, boasting the most resume-boosting win of the bunch over Nebraska ball, and 2 quality losses to Oklahoma and Virginia. And they blew out Xavier at home. Maryland is at 17-2. They have a quality loss at North Carolina and a decent loss at Michigan. But they don't really have many quality wins. Georgetown's probably their best win. And SMU is ineligible. They're not going to they can't go to the tournament because they're on NCAA probation, but they're undefeated at 18-0. There's going to be a lot of voters that don't want to vote them number one, but they might climb that high if these teams keep losing. There's so much parity in college basketball. Watch it once we get to March. It'll just be chalk in the NCAA tournament. Go figure. But this is such a fun year because everywhere you look, there's a team getting upset. You got to watch the little schools play because who knows? They might take down a giant. College basketball usually has so much parity because you don't have to have the money that you have to have in football. You don't have to have the infrastructure. Right. Yeah, I agree. You just have to have 5 guys plus who love to play basketball, who work at their game, and who can catch fire. It's all about it's so much more about it's so much more about being an athlete in basketball than it is about knowing your schemes, doing everything right, running plays. Sometimes it's just about running the floor and hitting the shots.
Yeah, and I think the key time to get hot for a lot of these teams is the end of the season. Going into a conference tournament and just before that, that's when you really see teams emerge from pretenders to contenders. And teams like Michigan State, yeah, they're slowing down right now, but Tom Izzo always knows how to coach those boys in March. So don't be surprised if you see Michigan State make a run late in the season. Agreed. Really, right now, you can be a top team in the country, but if you're slowing down late in the season or in a conference tournament, that's when teams should really be worried because, you never know when a team might upset, a Goliath. So teams really have to heat up at the end of the season.
No, I don't disagree. Here's the thing. Great coaching is super underrated in March because that's why Tom Izzo gets the Final Four, so often. But I need to say this. I've learned this football season. There's one term I absolutely hate. I hate quality loss. I hate the term quality loss. At the end of the day, you still lost. I know, granted, some sting a lot more than some others, but at the end of the day, it still lost me. And I need to get something off my chest here, too. Melo Trimble might be the most overhyped player in college basketball. I'm sorry. I am not blown away by him. You look at when they played Michigan, they lost that game. Melo Trimble, 4 turnovers, 2 points, 3 assists. Oh, wow, impressive. Let's go against Rutgers. I mean, granted, he only played 14 minutes, but 4 points and only 8 points against Ohio State. And he's a good player, and he's a very, very good clutch shooter. But 13 points and 5 assists should not be in the top 5 for best point guards in college basketball. He's overrated to me. I can't handle it.
I don't think you can really I don't think people are overhyping him too bad because nobody has him on like a Naismith watch or anything like that.
Yeah, they do.
In the top 5 or 6 or 7 in college basketball, because there's a few players that have really separated themselves as far as that conversation goes. Melo Trimble proved last year that he's a very valuable commodity for this Maryland team, and he hasn't really disappointed anybody this year. He's just been a little bit more of a not take over the game role. He's been really deferring a little bit to Rashid Suleiman and Diamond Stone. Diamond Stone's having a great year, true freshman.
I think he's the best player on that team. Diamond Stone is going to be a lottery pick in this upcoming NBA draft. He's a player.
But you look at some things. It's very clear. It's very clear to me and to a lot of people that, making an NBA analogy here, that LeBron is the best player in the game. But LeBron's stat line doesn't always indicate that. Sometimes you defer to other players to make your team better, and I think that's what Melo Trimble has done really well this year. And for what you said about the quality loss, if you watch Maryland's game at North Carolina and how they lost that game and that they played really well in that game and North Carolina pulled away late, I think that was about as quality of a loss as you could get because it grew that team so much. That was that team's first loss of the season, and their coach said it's kind of what they needed at that point to really refocus and get back in the game. And now 2 losses in January, you don't see this very often in college basketball, but 2 losses in January seems like a very, very, very small amount.
Yeah, in all honesty. And, there's some surprising teams that have made their appearance in the top 10. The team that catches my eye, Texas A&M. Are they the real deal or are they pretenders? And the reason why I say they could be pretenders, SEC isn't known for basketball. They are known for a great heavyweight football conference. But in terms of basketball, Kentucky really hasn't been great that year. Ben Simmons is great for LSU, but LSU really hasn't proven that they're a great basketball team. And A&M, 15-2 right now, but we'll see how good they truly are when we get to April and March. I know they're 8th in the country, but I'm not solely convinced on this team. I don't think that they're the real deal.
And I'll say this. I've watched Texas A&M play a few times. They're a good team, but you're exactly right. I don't know how far they'll go in March, but let me say, Jalen Jones is fantastic. Alex Caruso's been good for them. Daniel House has been good for them. I mean, they have multiple scorers, and they're a good team. But honestly, the SEC is just bad this year. I'll be honest. Kentucky's been unreal disappointing, I think, with all the talent they have on that team. But I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky ended up making the Final Four. I mean, it's just how they get together. It's like the team, I think it was 3 years ago when they were an 8 seed and they ended up making the championship game. So, it all comes down to coaching in March and good point guard play. And Kentucky has that. So,
well, the SEC has a few decent teams, but nobody that's really willing to stand out. I think Texas A&M has done well with that. They have a 15-2 record. South Carolina sitting there at 24th. They only have 1 loss, but they haven't really played anybody. Yeah. LSU, Ben Simmons, a good team. Quarterman's a good setup man for Ben Simmons. Kentucky's struggling. It's not a bad conference necessarily, but it's not a conference where anybody wants to stand up and stand out. Well, what about the Big 12? They've looked like the best conference this year, but does the Big 12's rough week this week hurt or bolster their reputation in your mind?
Honestly, I'm just going to say it bolsters their reputation, despite Oklahoma and Kansas both losing. And I think that just shows the quality in this conference. You look at Iowa State; they're pretty much in the lower half of the Big 12. This is a team who's 3-3 in conference, 14-4 overall, but they've played great teams: Kansas, West Virginia, Texas, Oklahoma, and Baylor. These are all teams who will probably make the tournament, and I wouldn't be surprised, in all honesty, if one of these teams can make it to the Final Four, because they're going to be battle-tested, unlike other teams who really haven't played the real deal, like Texas A&M. Their toughest opponents they're going to play are South Carolina and Kentucky. Meanwhile, Oklahoma's going to have to play Baylor, Kansas, West Virginia, Texas, Iowa State, all pretty much twice. And you know what? I think that these teams are going to be ready for April and March.
Now, I put up a preview article, at the beginning of the season. I picked Iowa State in the Final Four. Iowa State's not deep, but Iowa State's talent and their cohesiveness is off the charts. Jameel McKay is a great player. Georges Niang's my number 5 right now on my win watch list. I think he's an outstanding player, arguably the hardest player to guard in college basketball for his size and his versatility. Monte Morris might be one of the most underrated point guards in the country too. Very low turnover, great assister, can hit an open shot and can drive it and play good defense. So I'll tell you what, at the end of the day, I don't know if Iowa State will win they won't win the regular season, but I'll tell you what, I'm picking Iowa Sate to win the Big 12 tourney, and I think they're a legitimate team.
And Iowa State, it has those players that can fill every role you want to fill there.
Yep.
You got Jamel McKay doing work underneath. George Niang is obviously the star player of that team. And then Monte Morris hitting clutch shot after clutch shot, beating Iowa, beating Oklahoma because of Monte Morris's clutch shooting. He's on fire, and it's this Iowa State team. I don't trust them necessarily, but they could gel really well, and they could make a nice run toward the end of the year. Speaking of perennial tournament teams, is Louisville in the ACC, are they for real?
Honestly, I don't think so. I've watched a few games of theirs this season. It's not typical Rick Pitino coach teams. Honestly, don't be surprised if they end up as a 4 seed, though, in the NCAA. I'd pick them out in the first round. I don't trust this team at all. The guard play is okay. They don't really have the great underneath play. They have Donovan Mitchell. He's probably their best underneath player that I've seen from them in the games I've watched. But nothing really blows. There's no Russ Smith. There's no Montrezl Harrell. There's no one that just stands out like former Louisville teams. And I think that's going to be a problem going into March.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, David. And, this is a team who could make it to the Sweet 16, maybe an Elite 8 appearance, but I just don't think they have the talent like they did when they won the national championship however many years ago against Michigan. And, they've had quality games. Against Clemson, they lose by 4 points. Then they bounce back and beat Pittsburgh by 18. But like you said, that 4 seed in March, that's usually 4 or 5 seeds. Usually are the teams that are getting upset the most. So Louisville, they just had to play great basketball going into the tournament if they want to make a nice run.
A quick word from David before we head to the break. David, what's going on with Duke?
Tell you what, this is really embarrassing. I picked Duke to win the national title at the beginning of the year. But I'll tell you what, the biggest problem I've seen, they're not playing together as a team. They're not playing good defense. They're allowing so many points. Granted, Emile Jefferson's hurt. That's a huge, huge, huge loss that people don't realize. Because Emile Jefferson is the reason why they won the title last year when Jahlil Okafor may as well not even have gotten off the bus because he played like crap that game. Emile Jefferson slowed down Frank Kaminsky. But I'll tell you what, they're lacking the other big score. There's Brandon Ingram. There's Grayson Allen. But where's the third option? Plumlee is doing some work in the paint, but he's good for 4 minutes and bad for another 7 minutes. They don't have that good third option. I looked at Luke Kennard to be the third option, but he had a good game against Notre Dame, but hasn't shown up since. Mikey K's got some work to do. Got to get their defense back. I think that's the first thing they got to work on.
We'll see how all the college basketball teams gel as this season continues to heat up. Up next, we'll be back with pro football expert Michael Grandinetti and more on Hour 2 of the program. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
The Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.
Put him in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Goes to LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh, my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive.
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise. Keep making
Welcome back to the second hour of the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. Matt Reynoldson and David Eickholt with you. Scott Ayers is off for the second hour. All eyes are on the NFL this weekend, and we've got pro football expert Michael Grandinetti in the studio today. Welcome in, Michael.
Yeah, I appreciate it, fellas. I'm feeling a little pressure now with the whole expert title being thrown out there, but hopefully I deliver some good stuff. But talking sports, always a pleasure to do that, and happy you guys brought me in. Appreciate
Michael,
it.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see. You guys know, but for everyone listening out there, I'm a grad student here at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, studying professional journalism, going for a master's in that, and really got interested into broadcasting and this whole radio scene. So whenever somebody invites me on the air to talk some sports, I'm more than happy to do that. So I guess that's a little bit about me right there.
Well, we've got conference championship games taking center stage in the NFL. Which game sticks out to you more? The New England Patriots and Denver Broncos, or the Carolina Panthers and the Arizona Cardinals?
That's pretty tough. Both games have really some interesting storylines. I think from a football fan, just kind of watching and growing up with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, it's really hard to say that's not the more exciting game. But then I look on the other side and I see two kind of up-and-coming teams and haven't been there in the last few years, and Cam Newton leading the Carolina Panthers and Carson Palmer defeating Father Time and leading these Arizona Cardinals back to a place they haven't been in a while. So both games have a lot of interest. I can't wait to watch both. But I've rooted for Peyton Manning my entire life, and I've watched him play for so many years now, and I've always rooted for him. So I think I'll be watching that. Hopefully he can get back to another Super Bowl. It's been a running joke in my family that there's something wrong with the football gods if Eli finishes with more Super Bowl rings than his brother Peyton. And so I'm kind of hoping that things correct themselves this season and Peyton can finally tie Eli and kind of correct things in the world. But I like Cam Newton as well, and I wouldn't mind seeing them win. So it's going to be an exciting weekend of football, and I really can't wait.
Now, let me ask you this. What do you think is the cause of Peyton Manning's obviously less than on par play this season? Is it the injuries? Is it the age? Or what do you think? Is it the drop passes or what's been going on?
I think it's a little bit of all those factors as you just mentioned. Peyton's been a great player for a long time, and it's kind of interesting bringing another parallel. Two of my favorite athletes are going through some interesting times right now, Kobe Bryant and Peyton Manning, and it's tough to maintain the success for as long as they have. And, age is starting to catch up to him a little bit. He's had some injuries he's had to deal with, both players. But going back to Peyton, I think he's had great talent around him, and, it just hasn't worked out the way he's wanted to this season. Had to battle through the injuries. On the flip side, Tom Brady, he's just in this perfect system. He's been blessed to have Bill Belichick by his side the entire time, and I don't want that to take anything away from his success by any means, but it was just the match made in heaven. So Peyton, I think he's shown signs that he's gotten healthier again. He's able to put the passes where he wants to put them. He's got a little more velocity on those passes than he had before he was pulled again in that game against Kansas City. So we'll see. There's still a lot of question marks out about Peyton and how successful he's going to be. But you could see in that last game, in Week 17, even just inserting him into the game, even though he wasn't completing passes left and right, his ability to just kind of break down the defense and get the right play calls going ahead and open up holes in the running game, the team just seemed to be rejuvenated with him under center. So I'm curious if that momentum is going to kind of continue into this Sunday.
I want to touch on this real quick before we go back to talking about the playoff games. You're an LA native, and
this is true.
And 3 new teams possibly have the option to come in to LA. I just wanted to get your perspective as an LA sports fan. What does it mean to have the NFL coming back, and do you like the decisions made by one or all of these 3 teams?
Since this whole process, it's been a few-year process going about. My friends and I, we've had plentiful discussion about what teams we want, what teams we don't want, and the ranking has always kind of been Rams, Raiders, Chargers. So right now, the way it is, having the Rams and no other team, it is ideal, and we're already jumped on the Rams bandwagon. We're all pretty much Rams fans, and our girly jerseys are pretty much, in the mail. Haven't ordered them yet, but, theoretically in the mail. And we really can't wait to start cheering for them. And the city is excited to get a professional sports team, a professional NFL team back in LA. Now, going back what you said, how we kind of want to shake down, it sounds like the Chargers are going to end up making their way to LA. And it's really kind of interesting how it seems like the sentiment in Los Angeles is that we really don't want the Chargers, and that's not just me and my group, but kind of the city itself. There are people that are kind of hoping that they do get them. I mean, Los Angeles draws from the Orange County community as well, and that's about midway in between Los Angeles and San Diego. So there are a lot of Charger fans in that area that would love to have the Chargers move north. But the way it is right now, we have the Rams, and we kind of hope it stays that way, even though I think we all realize one of those two teams, and it kind of looks like it's going to be the Chargers, will ultimately be sharing that facility as well.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the Patriots and Broncos game because I'm looking down the injury report. You got Gronk, Edelman, and Amendola all questionable. Assuming they all play, how do you think the Denver's defense is going to try to at least to contain Gronk? Because you can never really shut him down. But how is Denver's defense going to kind of play out this game?
You know, I think you need two guys on Rob Gronkowski at all times on every single play. And even with that said, he can still make plays and do what he can do. With the kind of the lack of depth in running back for the New England Patriots, I mean, they've been cycling through running backs, and it hasn't just been this season, kind of in the last few seasons, and even more so going down the stretch here. I mean, signing Steven Jackson in like week 15 or something like that. I mean, that's pretty incredible, and they're still able to do what they're doing. So if you could shut down the run, and you can focus most of your defensive weapons on Gronkowski and Edelman, then you have a better chance to win the game. But I don't think the NFL has ever seen a guy like Rob Gronkowski on the field before. The things that he can do, the speed he has, with the size he has, and he seems to always make big plays in big games too. So it's a tough challenge. You want to say put two guys on them and make it slower for them and make it harder for them to execute. It seems like they always still find a way, and I can imagine Belichick's going to have a plan to counter whatever Denver's going to throw at him.
I want to talk about my Cardinals a little bit. What do you think the key is, whether it be a player, whether it be the defense, something like that? What do you think the key is for the Cardinals to try and go into Charlotte and pull this upset?
Absolutely. I think Carolina's identity is run the ball, play tough defense. And I think if Arizona can stop the running game as much as possible, it's tough to do, especially when you got a guy in the backfield like Cam Newton who can beat you with his legs and his arms and do whatever he can do. But if you can stop the run and make him more one-dimensional and try to make Cam beat you with his arms, and Carolina's pass catchers have been getting the job done all season. There's been a lot of heat on them that it's not the greatest receiving core in the league. But they've still been getting the job done. But with such a great secondary that Arizona has, if you can kind of put the pressure and make it more of a one-dimensional game, I definitely think they have a better chance to win it and pull off, an upset. It wouldn't be much of an upset, but I think most people are picking Carolina right now.
And one of my favorite, surprises in players this season has been the emergence of David Johnson for the Arizona Cardinals. But he's listed as questionable right now. What should the Cardinals do if, he can't give it a go?
That's a good question. They've been kind of relying on David Johnson to carry the ball and even use him in the passing game down the stretch here and even last week in the Green Bay game. So what they got to do, I think Carson probably has to take a little bit more on himself and a little bit more responsibility in the passing game and kind of clean up some of those errant throws that we saw last week. I still can't believe that pass that got through. I know I'm wearing my Packers sweatshirt right now, so I might be wearing my colors on my sleeve, my true feelings on my sleeve, but I still can't believe that tip ball landed in Michael Floyd's hands in the end zone late in the game. It got bailed out. It kind of looked like they were destined to get to where they are now. So if Carson can clean up some of those mistakes, he's got great weapons around him in Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, the Browns, so we'll see what they can do. And, he's been there before. He's been in big stages before. He's kind of had some flack on him for not performing in those big lights. So I'm really curious to see what Carson can do. And if Johnson's not able to play, I think the pressure's going to fall on his shoulders.
We're going to talk about this random matchup between two guys named Tom and Peyton. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. What do you think is the key for Denver to try and win this game outside of Peyton?
It's so tough to beat Tom. He's just done it so many times. And people want to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and I know they'll be the first ones to say, well, hey, we're just quarterbacks on the team. We're actually going against the actual defense, and we're really not worried about the other guy calling the snaps on the other side. But to beat Tom, I really think you got to get to him. You got to put some pressure on him. Luckily, I mean, for Denver's sake, they got Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware coming off the edges and able to, I mean, some of the best pass rushers that we've seen in the league over time in DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller currently in the league. So, I mean, they have the weapons to put pressure on them. They got a great secondary that can maybe keep those weapons on New England's side of the ball in check and maybe cause Tom to hold the ball for a few extra ticks. So, you know, if they can get him, if they can hit him, kind of like what we saw late in the season when Miami and Ndamukong Suh was able to get to Tom Brady and pull off an upset there in South Beach, they have a better chance to win. And that shouldn't be a huge – it's going to be a difficult task for them, but Denver's got a great defense, and they have the weapons to create pressure on Tom Brady, and I think that's kind of how you can get the job done.
And I know we're kind of going back and forth here, but I think a storyline that's really, really been hidden this week because obviously, you know, the Cam Newton, how's he going to do versus Carson Palmer. I have not heard anyone talk about Larry Fitzgerald versus Josh Norman. I mean, that's going to be one of the best matchups, I think, of the year. Who do you think comes on top? Because obviously Larry Fitzgerald, I think one of the best wide receivers of all time. And, you know, Josh Norman's just been a lockdown corner this year. Who do you think wins that matchup? And do you think that matchup could possibly decide the game?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to have a big impact in the game. It's interesting. I think before the season, nobody knew who Josh Norman was, other than maybe serious diehard football fans. And now he's kind of turned into a household name, especially with the whole Odell Beckham incident that happened a few weeks ago. So that's a premier matchup that's going to take place on Sunday. Larry Fitzgerald, like you said, one of the best wide receivers to ever play this game against Josh Norman, currently one of the better cornerbacks in the league. So I saw a stat a few days ago. It said Michael Irvin leads all pass catchers of all time with 600-yard postseason games, and Larry Fitzgerald is second with 5. So he's going to go try to tie that record. He is a big game player. He always seems to step up in the postseason, and I don't see anything else. You know, I kind of think that's going to transpire again this weekend. Josh Norman's great, but Larry Fitzgerald seems to rise up in the biggest stages, and it's a tough guy to cover.
Yeah.
So I kind of,
for sure.
I think Larry won't be the issue if Arizona does end up losing the game. I don't think it'll be because Larry Fitzgerald doesn't get open.
Let's talk about the main storyline of the weekend, which is this could possibly be the final installment of Manning versus Brady. First, talk about where this rivalry stands in the all-time football and sports rivalries and what this game means in a historical context.
Yeah, you know, I kind of hope people can just, for the game itself, I hope the game lives up to the hype and all this, the publicity kind of surrounding it, but I think us sports fans need to just kind of appreciate what we're seeing. I mean, this is something that I don't think it's ever happened really the way, I mean, more so in basketball, but in football, to have two great quarterbacks battle so many times and have so much on the line here. I think, the last 13 or 14 Super Bowls, only 4 quarterbacks have represented the AFC, and most of those have been Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady, and only one time was it Joe Flacco. So this is something really historic, and I hope we can appreciate that. And 2 great quarterbacks, who knows when they're going to be back again. I mean, it doesn't seem like Tom Brady is slowing up at all. And I think we've kind of predicted for some years that eventually you're going to see some decline, and it still seems like you're playing at such a high level. So as a sports fan, I'm going to appreciate this. I'm going to try to soak up every moment of it as I can. Like I mentioned, I grew up idolizing Peyton Manning. He was always my favorite player. And I still remember him going to those classic battles to Foxborough when it was snowing outside. He just didn't have quite enough to get past him in those postseason games. So he's got a great team around him now, as well as Tom Brady. I think people have the narrative behind Tom the last few years is he does more with less than any other quarterback. And I think you could definitely make the case for that. So. Great matchup. They kind of been comparing it. I've heard on some kind of radio outlets, media outlets, comparing it to like the Magic Bird rivalry in basketball. I think you kind of see that more along the lines in basketball, but this is something really special, and I think it's just another treat that we get, and hopefully the game doesn't disappoint because media has been hyping up like crazy, as it should be. So I'll be sitting on my couch watching it, enjoying it.
Now it's kind of just kind of steer away from the playoffs for a second, but just a general football question. They recently released a poll of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Cam Newton, I believe, finished third or fourth. He was behind Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and I feel like maybe Russell Wilson is above him. Where do you think Cam Newton ranks right now in terms of quarterbacks?
Right around there. I think, off the top of my head, it's really tough to, especially with the success he's had this season, to put anybody over him. I think Tom and A-Rod and Aaron Rodgers, I think those are the common, the common choices as 1, 2, however order you want to put them. But I think you can make a case for Cam Newton right there, right behind him. The things that he can do with his arm and with his legs, honestly, I wish he ran more, because I think he's so effective when he does that, and he's so hard to tackle. So the success that he's had, Russell Wilson's great too. Big Ben, when he's healthy, he's also great. He's probably maybe that next tier down just slightly. But Cam's really made a mark on the league now. I think he's starting to change the way people perceive the dual threat quarterback. I think they're even getting more credit and more respect in the league, and I think he's kind of changing the way football's played in the NFL, and even you could see it kind of trickle down to the lower levels as well. So I really like Cam. I've liked it since he entered the league. I think he's really fun to watch. I think it's unfair how much criticism he gets from people, and I don't think he deserves it. So I think he's just having fun out there. And I guess it sounds like, Matt, you're an Arizona fan. I think that's what you said. I'll be cheering for Carolina this weekend, but should be a good game, and a lot of stars out there on the field, and it'll be fun to watch.
So let's get your game predictions for the NFC and AFC championships. Which teams are going to be meeting in Super Bowl 50?
Weeks ago, I think it was around Thanksgiving break, I was back home in California, and a friend of mine, one of my really good friends, he asked me, so, all right, who are your Super Bowl picks? In AFC, it was clearly, I think New England had only had 1 or 2 losses at that time. It was like a no-brainer. It was like, I think it's probably going to be New England. If anybody beats them, maybe Denver. And on the West, on the National League, NFC, I said Arizona. So just to kind of prove that I kind of knew what I was talking about, I kind of would like Arizona to get there, and I don't want to stay off. I don't want to abandon ship yet. But after what Carolina did last week, I think they got healthier. I think they're on even an upward trend, and I don't even know if that was possible when you're 15-1. They might even be getting better. On the other side of things, Arizona is almost a slight downward trend after what happened to them week 17, and then coming back in a kind of a shaky performance against Green Bay last week. So my heart is going with Arizona. My mind is going with Carolina. So I guess I'll side with my mind on this one. I'm going to go like 27-20 Carolina. I think they'll be representing the NFC in the Super Bowl. And the other side of things, although it kind of breaks my heart to say it, I think New England will probably get back there. I'm going to go like maybe like 31-24, right around those lines, give or take a little bit. So I think it's going to be a Cam Newton, Tom Brady Super Bowl this year.
Awesome. It should be a great weekend of football. Michael, will you stay with us to talk a little NBA roundtable after this?
Oh, absolutely. Can't wait.
All right, sounds good. We will switch gears to the NBA after this. While LeBron is still the best in the game, 6 of the top 7 players in the world right now play in the Western Conference. Does that have issues? We'll talk about it after the break. More NBA, more sports talk coming up next. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, So basically, it's just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court to do what I gotta do.
Now, live from Andersen Hall on the UNL campus, here's Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU2. We're switching gears to the NBA. LeBron, still the best in the game, but the other top 7 players are in the Western Conference. Yes, the conferences as far as teams seem to be balanced as far as parity goes, but is the West being stacked with star players bad for the game?
I don't think it's bad in terms of getting in the regular season. I think in the playoffs it's bad because stars win championships at the end of the day because for me right now, I'm pretty convinced whoever comes out of the West is going to win the NBA title, because there's 3 legitimate teams in the Western Conference. Obviously, the Golden State Warriors. The San Antonio Spurs are dominating opponents right now. And I'd still put Oklahoma City a little bit lower than the other 2, but they're still a very elite team when it comes to the playoffs and of course, the regular season. But, again, regular season entertainment-wise, Jimmy Butler's really starting to emerge, I think. And I don't know. We'll see how the young talent develops over the next couple of years in the Eastern Conference.
It's really interesting. I never really thought about that, all the best players being in the Western Conference. And it makes sense. The West has always had the best teams, or in recent memory has had the best teams. And I guess it kind of seems that the best players other than LeBron are kind of in the Western Conference. And I don't think it's bad. I think the NBA would like to see more of those guys in the Eastern Conference. But, I mean, still got Carmelo and a handful of other guys. Maybe some younger guys like Kristaps Porzingis maybe stepping up and maybe going to be one of those best great players in upcoming years. So, as you mentioned, the West, it's always been strong. And I'm kind of with you on that. I think the Cavs provide the best shot for the Eastern Conference to win, but I think it's going to be tough to beat Golden State or San Antonio or even Oklahoma City if they end up getting out of the West.
Well, David, there's a lot of stars that play for Philadelphia. Why has Philadelphia become such a black hole?
I'll tell you what. First of all, I think it starts up top. The ownership. The ownership's not doing what it needs to do. And they keep tanking season after season after season in the hopes of getting that one person that's going to emerge. And one player is not going to make the difference. The only possible player right now that could is Ben Simmons. But what have we said about before? We said that about Jahlil Okafor. We said that about Andrew Wiggins. And Philadelphia, frankly, they're not even guaranteed the number 1 overall pick every year. So I think in terms of tanking, it's just not good. And inconsistency. I mean, when they were 1 and I believe 30 or 2 and 30, they extended their head coach another 2 years. Does that not open up any eyes whatsoever? Granted, they are playing better now. They actually have a decent point guard in Ish Smith, very unknown name, but he's actually a really good player. But I think it starts with the owners. They need the consistency. They need the more hands-on approach, and they need better coaching. And they need Jahlil Okafor just got to keep doing what he's doing in terms of development, because I think he's turning into a pretty good center.
Michael, would you want to play in Philadelphia?
I'll play for anybody who's going to pay me, who's going to give me a contract. Absolutely. You can sign me up now and I'll go play for Philadelphia. But it's interesting how they've had this just been in the bottom and haven't been able to kind of work themselves up. They did get unlucky with Joel Embiid. They're still waiting to see his first game, and he was a draft lottery pick. And I don't know if you guys have seen pictures of him. He's really starting to bulk up. He's kind of looking like Dwight Howard now. It's pretty crazy. But, it's showing – I think everyone knows the NBA system. It's flawed with the whole tanking method and how you're kind of losing games is actually winning. I mean, as a Laker fan right now, I remember over break, we were cheering when Rajon Rondo hit a floater for Sacramento to end up beating the Lakers because we're trying to get closer to that Ben Simmons pick. So it's tough. It's a flawed system. Can Philly work their way back? I think they can. Also, it's a free agent league too. Are they going to be able to attract any great free agents to go play there? Maybe if 2 or 3 guys band together and decide that they're going to rise up and turn the franchise around, maybe that could happen. So it's a long process. They have been a little unlucky. Poor management as well will contribute to that too. So. I feel bad for Philly fans. They deserve a couple wins every once in a while.
They've really just not been really that good since Allen Iverson retired. Allen Iverson. Well, that's the last memorable team that was when Allen Iverson dragged that team in the NBA Finals back in, I believe it was 2002.
And something like that. I think, they played the Lakers back in 2002.
During Shaq's really dominant years.
Since then, Andre Iguodala has been their best player. And, Andre Iguodala, a really solid NBA player, not exactly going to carry your franchise to the NBA Finals every year. So they've had some tough luck. I'm sure they'll be back one day. It is a great basketball town. They had great history before that. So, I've always kind of cheered for the Sixers, and we'll see if they can maybe hit on the next pick because they'll be back in the lottery this season for sure.
In terms of the NBA lottery, it's a flawed system, but it's the best system at least I can think of because even if you tank, you're not guaranteed the number 1 overall pick. They give the chance. I believe it's top 14 teams, the ones that grant if you're 14, you have like a 0.01% chance or whatever it is, 0.1 maybe. But there's not really many other systems that could be better, at least I think.
It is true. You got to have a better system in place before you can change what currently goes on. It has kind of seemed to work out that the team with the worst record hasn't always gotten that number one pick, too, which is kind of interesting. I remember the one year when Cleveland
they
got
had
the
like
number
2.5% chance or something like that, and they ended up getting the number one overall pick.
I think, was that the Anthony Bennett year? I don't think it ended up.
No, that was Wiggins.
That was Wiggins. So they ended up turning that into Kevin Love. So maybe I think some people might have argued that they should have kept Andrew Wiggins.
I do.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a stud. So it is the system has its holes, but I don't think it's hard to find a system that is perfect.
What do Philadelphia fans want from this team in the next 5 years? Because in my estimation, it looks like they want to just stop being the butt of jokes and get to it sounds horrible, but get to that irrelevant part of the NBA.
Right? Sometimes you can make the case that if you're in the middle, you're in better position than getting slammed on media every single night for just being how bad they are. I mean, for them to set the record, I think last season and the season before, to start the season 0-17 or wherever it was, and for them to break that same record this season, I mean, you can't even write that script. So I think to answer your question, I think they want hope. They don't even I don't even know if that's a tangible win and loss record. They just want some kind of sign that things are turning around and that they can compete sometime in the future.
And I got a stat for you. So the 76ers had, I think it was 7 or 8 draft picks in this last draft. How many centers do you think they drafted?
In the last draft?
Just in the last draft. Yep, they had 7 or 8 picks.
Oh, man.
Really?
Yes, they did.
2 rounds? Wow.
Yeah, they had 5 second-round picks.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, the only one I can think of, second-round pick in the NBA, that's usually Mr. Irrelevant right there.
Yeah.
The only one I can think of is really Jaleel. I don't know.
They drafted 5 centers out of the last draft.
Oh, man.
Only Jaleel's on the team still. They tanked and traded away for. And Grant, here's the thing. I told you, it starts up top. They keep trading players. You can never have good chemistry if you keep trading all your players to go to another team or even the D League.
I think that's a good point. I mean, they had a solid point guard in Michael Carter-Williams just last season. He might not be Jason Kidd or the next Steve Nash, but he's a piece that you could build around, and him and Jahlil Okafor. And when you finally do get Embiid back, Nerlens Noel, I think they were going to expect him and Jahlil to kind of play better together. I heard that they actually don't even see the floor together anymore. They kind of are on opposite shifts. So they have been unlucky, kind of what I was mentioning before, but also, like you mentioned, poor management, poor trades. There were some pieces there that you could build around. And I don't know who they got back from Milwaukee, but I don't think that trade ended up working out.
Honestly, I'm looking at the roster. I don't recognize anyone that was on the former roster. But here's the thing. If I was a 76ers fan, I don't mind them. Like, I don't dislike them. I think I've always kind of cheered for them because they're bad. But I would rather keep the same people and lose for at least for them to gain chemistry together. It feels like they are signing new players every 3 weeks. They're trading away players every 3 weeks. That is not, in any sport at any level, that's not a recipe for success. And they need that consistency. They need the same coaching staff. They need the young talent. They need to play Noel and Okafor together because they're I think they're opposite players.
I'll tell you what they need.
Outstanding offense. Nerlens Noel is a great defender, a great shot blocker.
I'll tell you what they need. The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford. I'm saying it right now. Walter Pitchford could have saved that organization.
That is a bold statement if I've ever heard one. Walt P for 3. Maybe he might have been able to.
Walt P for 3 titles.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Here's what I've always thought, though, and it's another unpopular opinion I have. I think they should have Allen Iverson coach that team. I really do. I think Allen Iverson.
Former players are becoming coaches right away.
And Allen Iverson was one of the most fun players I've ever seen play the game of basketball.
Absolutely.
Outstanding. I think he'd be a heck of a coach. But, it's an upgrade from what they got now.
Allen Iverson, he's, people say, one of the most competitive players to ever play in the NBA. And I always remember the story. My mom and dad used to tell me that Magic Johnson tried to stint in coaching the Lakers right after he retired. But he had so much passion for the game of basketball, and he could do so much on the court that he was too frustrated to coach the team. It drove him crazy that the players didn't play with the same kind of passion that he played with and couldn't do the things that he could do on the court. And I think that might be Allen Iverson's might be a problem with Allen Iverson. That's why I think Kobe Bryant can never be a coach. That's why I think Michael Jordan can never be a coach. Those guys are just so competitive and want it so bad that to see guys going through the motions, to hear Jahlil Okafor getting in fistfights, I don't think they could live with that.
Do you think Kevin Durant could be a coach? Because Durant has publicly stated that he wants to become a head coach after he retires.
He's got like 15 years till that happens, though, right?
I mean, I know Grant, but still, like, could you ever? I could see Kevin Durant. I think it's
he's a little more mild mannered. He seems a little bit more personable than these other guys. I think maybe if there was a superstar that could coach, he might be on that list. But that'll be interesting. I think Kevin Durant seems like a good communicator, and I think that's part of being a great coach too. So that'd be interesting. I like to see Kevin Durant. Maybe he'll coach the Lakers one day.
Speaking of Kevin Durant, the All-Star rosters were released yesterday, and Kevin Durant is a starter for the West. Joining him in the West is Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry, Russell Westbrook, and Kawhi Leonard. There's 5 greats and 1 all-time great. Don't tell me that Steph Curry is an all-time great yet.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't disagree.
In the East, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, Dwayne Wade, and Kyle Lowry. Notable leave out of the starting lineup is Paul Millsap in the East. What do you guys think of those lineups?
I'll tell you what. I love Kobe Bryant. I respect him. He's one of the best players to ever play the game basketball. He shouldn't be starting. I'm sorry. The production this year, the injuries, the age, it's not adding up starters. Draymond Green should be starting, I think, for the West. Draymond Green, right now, for me, is the MVP of the league.
We all have Draymond Green as a top 7 player in the league right now.
And again, it's so tough for me to argue against Kobe Bryant because he's such a great player. But let me just say this. Zaza Pachulia was 45,000 votes short of getting in over Draymond Green in the All-Star game. I don't know. It just blows my mind. But, yeah, I think Draymond Green should be starting.
No, we talk about kind of systems with flaws. I think all All-Star game voting has some systems with flaws. Is a flawed system. I mean, you look back just a couple years ago, and now the MLB All-Star Game controls home field advantage in the World Series, yet the fans still vote for these players. But when it's competitive, the best players need to be on the field. So I think last year there were like 5 or 6 Royals that were about to start until things happened at the very last minute. A couple years before that, there were 5 or 6 San Francisco Giants going to start in the National League before things happened. So it is a system we have. Kobe's farewell tour has struck people even more profoundly than I was even expecting. I knew it was going to be hard for Laker fans, but from him, I always remember Kobe getting booed wherever he went, and now he seems like he's getting cheered in every arena, and it's still kind of shocking for me to see. But going back to the rosters themselves, I think they really show how much different the game is now. I mean, there's not one center on either of these rosters going to the game.
Do you feel like centers have the right? There should always be a center that starts?
Not necessarily. I think it should be the 10 best players, and I think this is close to the 10 best players. I think you can argue. I mean, Kobe, for as much as I love him, I can't say he's maybe one of the 5 best players in the Western Conference now, but he's got that star appeal. He's a legend, and I'm not upset to see him in the game by any means. But this is a really good collection of talent here. But I just think it shows how important the three-pointer is, how much faster the game is now. They're not working from the inside out. It's all perimeter-based. The best guys in the league are the guys with the ball in their hands. So it's been a change of pace, and I just kind of thought that was the most striking thing about it, that it's a bunch of forwards and guards out there and not really any quote-unquote big men out there playing in the game.
I'll tell you what. I remember a couple years ago, they almost voted Tracy McGrady in the All-Star game when he didn't play a single game up to that point. That's like re-releasing a Tupac album and giving him a Grammy. Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, the whole system's flawed right now, and there's no escaping that. I think that should be Adam Silver's next task. Don't give me that hack-a-shack crap he needs to fix. Make your dang free throws. It's part of the game. But, I don't know. All-Star has a long way to go to be fixed, but I don't disagree. I think they still got the majority of the starters right. Not the biggest fan of Kyle Lowry starting. I think
Kyle Lowry has been by far the best point guard in the East.
I'd give John Wall.
I think John Wall is good because he's carrying the Wizards, but the Wizards have just been bad. And Kyle Lowry has become the face, along with DeMar DeRozan, of this Toronto Raptors team, and a good Toronto Raptors team that before they get to the playoffs, because Toronto can't do anything in the playoffs as far as any sport. But I think Kyle Lowry was a good addition. When I was looking at some preview articles of the All-Star game that a lot of them had Paul Millsap and Al Horford starting. And I realized you want the you want the players that have done the most this season, but can you imagine less of an all-star game draw from the casual sports fan than Al Horford starting a game?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about the All-Star game is seeing, I mean, it's the All-Star game. These are the stars of the league out there.
Exactly.
And maybe the first half, it might be fun in games. The defense isn't all there, and there's alley-oops left and right, but they're putting on a show for the fans. And then the fourth quarter comes around, and guys are starting to compete. They're starting to play hard. They want to win the game. And the NBA All-Star Game is one of my favorite games of the entire season because, like I said, it is the stars of the league, the biggest names out there. I mean, you could say what you want about Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony. They're getting up there in age, but the guys can still flat out play, and they're still a superstar. They're still superstars in the league. So I'm excited for it. The lineup has some turnover over recent years, but still should be exciting.
Let's switch gears a little bit here. I want to get to this before the break. Tyronn Lue, an ex-Nebraska basketball player, the Nebraska Ball Uprising, has just become the Cavaliers head coach, the Cleveland Cavaliers head coach that was released within an hour ago. What do you guys think of this promotion, and do you think he'll be able to carry the Cavs to new heights?
I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't know about new heights because the Cavaliers, say what you want about the 30-11. I mean, they're not bad. They are still a very, very much – they're probably coming out of the East. David Blatt had unreal expectations. I mean, from my perspective, you have unreal expectations for him coming over to the league. Because remember, last year was his first year in the NBA. He was very successful overseas, but I think he deserved to finish out this season at least before firing him. But I think the Cavaliers are starting to realize LeBron's dominance, at least in my opinion, it's going to slow down. He's played more minutes than Magic Johnson already. I don't care how great he is or whatever. That takes a toll on his body, and it's really going to start showing, I think, in the next year. So I think they're kind of going all in. They need to win it this year. But I'll tell you what, I think it's a solid replacement, but I still feel for David Blatt.
Yeah, I mean, we heard this news. You guys had just started the show, and you went to the first break, and we're just going crazy in here. I mean, an NBA coach getting fired when he's first in his entire conference and took his team to the NBA Finals the year before. I mean, that's just unheard of. But going on Tyronn Lue, Brian Windhorst tweeted out, he says, James' fondness for Tyronn Lue and his desire to be coached by a former player was well known in the organization, as were its issues with Blatt. So I think Tyronn Lue already has the support of LeBron James, and I think that will carry on to the rest of the team. And if you can kind of buy into your coach, if you can connect with him, which I'm sure Tyronn Lue can do maybe more than a David Blatt, I think you might be able to inspire those guys a little bit more. And also another tweet that I saw earlier, I just feel like it should be said by Ethan Strauss of ESPN.com, the top seed in East and West got new coaches today. Because I don't know if you guys remember.
Steve
Kerr's coming back too. So I thought that was kind of interesting that both the 1 and 2 teams in the NBA are coming back with new coaches.
And just let me know that David Blatt is the third coach in the last 40 seasons to be fired the season following an NBA Finals appearance. And I believe he's the first time ever, I think, that while they're on top of the conference, that coach has been fired.
I was going to say I couldn't think of one off the top of my head.
At least since 1970, I think, since LS Sports Bureau started keeping track of stats and all that.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems unheard of to fire a coach who's number one in the conference. So I guess there's a day for everything, and we saw the first coach get fired when he's got a first place team ever in the NBA.
I really would kind of want to take a Nebraska ball perspective on this. This is a huge deal for Nebraska basketball, and especially if one side note, I really like what you said about the Cavaliers organization is kind of realizing that LeBron 2 to 3 years down the road. I'm thinking 4 years down the road he's gonna start really deteriorating, not really be LeBron anymore because he's gotten so many minutes. So I think once he hits that 35, 36 age range, he'll start declining. I don't think you can take away what he's done, but I think you can definitely say that the time is now. And if they want a championship, if they want 2 championships for that city, one of them's got to be this year. I think they can still win one after this year, whether that be next year or 2 years down the road. But I think this year they have to win it. But from a Nebraska ball perspective, this is a huge recruiting sell. Hey, one of our former players coaches the Cleveland Cavaliers. Hey, Tyronn Lue is drawing publicity to Nebraska basketball and a program that has never really been prominent in the news, in sports, in anything except for Lincoln, Nebraska.
And I'll tell you what, from my perspective, I think if LeBron doesn't win one this year or next year, I don't think he'll ever win one for Cleveland. Again, he's young in terms of age, but in minutes, his body is taking a beating just by how much he's running the floor, taking shots when he drives the post and everything else. And it sucks for LeBron that the Western Conference right now has one of the most star-studded rosters we've seen in memory. I mean, again, the Golden State Warriors are unbelievable right now. The San Antonio Spurs are blowing teams out. The Thunder are always just a force to be reckoned with. I mean, there's 3 teams right there that I could easily see not sweeping the Cavaliers because LeBron won't get swept, but beat them in 5, maybe 6 games. I mean, all 3 of those teams are capable of being the Cavaliers, and LeBron needs to win it this year or next year.
I think we proved last year that no matter how good your team is versus no matter how little the Cavaliers it's not going to be easy to beat LeBron. The thing is, everybody saw LeBron almost single-handedly take down the Golden State Warriors last year, and we know how stacked that team is. Maybe they had a few finals jitters that caused them to lose a couple games, but LeBron's finals performance last year is one of the greatest performances we will ever see in a championship event. And you know, going for around 40 a game, that's nuts. And still carrying his team in every facet of the game. The thing is, you're right about this year needing to be the year. It's just the West is stacked this year again. It's going to be so hard to see. Well, first of all, will the West grind be too grueling for the team once they get to the finals? Just maybe fall apart, whether that be the Spurs, the Thunder, the Warriors, or some team like the Clippers coming out of there. It's whether the star players in the West, like we started off the segment with. It's whether the star players in the West can truly come to fruition in the playoffs when it matters.
And, I think you guys are right. I mean, for the Cavs right now, as with the Golden State Warriors, as with all the best teams in the NBA, the mindset is always championship or bust, and I think that takes on a little bit more for Cleveland. But I think we got to kind of remember back to last season. There was no Kyrie Irving. There was no Kevin Love in the NBA Finals. We don't know what these teams are going to look like in May and in early June. There's still a lot of basketball to be played with. Any of these guys can go down at any minute, and somebody could get hurt. And you don't want to predict injuries by any means, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast. And I'm curious to see how these teams look in a few months now.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Here's one thing I want to know really quick from you guys. We have 7 years from now. Who's going to be the best player in the NBA? You can think of current players or college players right now. Who do you think is going to be arguably one of the best players in the NBA?
I think it's going to be Draymond Green. I think the thing is, he's worked on his game. He's worked on his athleticism most of all. He was kind of lugged around a little bit at Michigan State, and he was a great player. Carried that program for 2 or 3 years while he was there, but nobody really expected that transition to the NBA to be quite as amazing as it has been. He wasn't really an NBA player. He was a star college player. He went, I believe, all 4 years at Michigan State and did a really good job for that program. But this is a guy that knows how to win games at every level, that knows how to carry a team at every level. And I think it's pretty clear that he's carrying his team now. They can't even go into Denver and win without him, Yeah. Yes, everybody wants to talk about Steph Curry, and Steph Curry's an amazing offensive player. But Draymond's doing everything out behind the scenes, and him just, oh, look, another Draymond Green triple-double. Oh, look, another Draymond Green triple-double. It's such a common thing to see on the stat line, and it's astonishing. The sky's the limit for this guy, and he might. I hate to predict that we'll have like a superstar, like a main central guy that everybody's going to be talking about, like a Kobe or a LeBron, but that's what could happen with Draymond Green if he keeps producing at the level he is now.
I really like Draymond a lot. I'm not as high on him as you guys are. I think he's a really, really solid player. I don't think the Warriors would be as good if they didn't have Draymond. But I'm on the fence that I think Steph drives the car and drives the truck, and Draymond is in the perfect situation to kind of maximize his ability. And I don't want to take anything away from him because he's a great player. But going back to your question, who I think the best player in 7 years will be, I think there's a couple of names that come to mind. I think Anthony Davis, we kind of talked about pre-show. I think the sky's the limit for that guy. He can handle the ball at almost 7 feet. He grew up as a point guard, sprouted up, and now he's got big man ability too. And then I think another guy that kind of comes to mind is Andrew Wiggins. I think the sky's the limit for that guy as well as his jump shot continues to develop. He's as athletic as anybody in the game. He can create his own shot. He can get to the basket. Seems like he's putting up a highlight every other night. So in just his second year, I think he averaged close to 20 points last year. I think he's about 20 points a game this season. And I think he's just going to continue to develop and turn into one of, if not the best players in the game. And I also really like Kyrie Irving. Might not be number one, but I think he's going to be in the conversation at one point in his career when he finally kind of comes out of LeBron's shadow and is able to even do more and showcase his talents even more. So those are the three guys that I'll continue to monitor, and those are three of my favorite players in the league, and see how they kind of develop.
I'm going to throw you guys a major curveball for who I think is going to be the best player in 7 years.
You teased this earlier, so let's hear it.
His name's Marvin Bagley III.
Marvin Bagley III.
He is the number one player in the sophomore class right now of high school. But I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me. Listen though. He's 6'10", 185 pounds. He can handle the ball as a big man better than I've seen most people. He's probably Anthony Davis in terms of dribbling the basketball. He can rebound. He can block. He can hit threes. Great post play. Great rebounder. I'm not blown away by many high school prospects. Ben Simmons and I were kind of, okay, like, yeah, this kid's really good. I am blown away by this guy. I think he could be an Anthony Davis mold, and that's really high praise from someone as young as he is. Here's the thing, though. He's ineligible to play high school basketball this season because he transferred, and he's at Sierra Canyon's a high school powerhouse, because it was athletically motivated, and the California high school were like, no, you can't play, no, whatever. But this kid is going to be a player. Watch for him in college, and he will be one of the better big men in the NBA in just his first or even second year. So,
how tall is he currently?
6'10".
6'10".
6'10", 185 pounds, but that's as a sophomore. He's obviously I bet he'll be 220 by the time he hits college. He'll bulk up.
I'll remember this conversation, and I'll remember that name, and if he ever ends up panning out, that reminds me of another big guy kind of along those lines. I think Karl Anthony Towns is going to be one of the best players in the NBA as well. And, fellas, before we wrap up the NBA segment, I just had to throw this in. It is the 10th anniversy of Kobe's 81 point game. This
10 years ago today.
This is my childhood idol, the Black Mamba, Froby, and I love the guy, and I'm sad that this is his final year, so I had to definitely give a shout out. I still remember watching the game. I don't think I've ever seen that many swishes in one game. There probably has never been that many swishes in one game in an NBA game before, and it was truly remarkable. I remember watching it, and just had to give a little shout out to Kobe on that.
Is Kobe Bryant playing tonight?
That is always a question, and it's probably they're playing
the Spurs tonight.
It's only 2:37 in LA right now, so I'm sure that news probably isn't out yet.
Kobe Bryant's dropping 82 tonight.
82. He's calling, and he's also calling Marvin Bagley III. So you sophomores in high school, you better
impress me.
You better watch your backs. All right, coming up next is the final rundown. Stay with us. This is the Spill Sports Show. It's the final rundown. Welcome into the final segment of the Spill Sports Show. This is the final rundown. Each host, 30-second rant. The other hosts each get a 30-second rebuttal on each topic. It's crunch time, and things are about to get heated. Michael, you're on the clock.
Well, fellas, I'm going to talk about a sport we haven't touched on today, and I'm going to the diamond. Somehow, Yoenis Cespedes is still out there as a free agent. This guy played like 50 games in the National League last year, put the New York Mets on his back, almost won the MVP, by playing such a short amount of time, and yet he still doesn't have a deal. It's been reported, Buster Olney reported for ESPN, that the Mets are finally starting to work on a 3-year deal with him. But I'm just curious, fellas, how is he still on the market?
Honestly, I have no idea. He had an outstanding season, and I'm just curious to see, because I don't think he's going to end up with the Mets. I don't know who he's going to end up with, but I think somebody else is going to shovel him a lot more money, and he's just going to eat it all up. But I'll tell you what, he's got to be one of my favorites for MVP next year. I don't see how he can't be. Outside of Mike Trout, because I think Mike Trout is still obviously the future, and Chris Bryant, I think it'll be a good 3-man race. So we'll see.
I think this speaks to a larger problem in the MLB of paying for pitchers but not paying for the bats. And the Red Sox gave David Price a $212 million contract or something crazy like that.
Right around those lines, yeah.
My goodness. People are paying for pitchers and they're not paying for their offense. And, if you're looking for consistent bats like what won the Royals the World Series this year, Yoenis Cespedes. If you're looking for a home run hitter, Yoenis Cespedes. If the only reason to not get him is you don't want to spend the money, that's a stupid idea. David, you're on the clock.
Jim, I'll tell you what, I recently released a podcast for my top 5 for the Wooden Watch Award. I'll tell you what, I think it's a one-man race. It's a one-man race to lose at this point. Buddy Hield from the University of Oklahoma has been blowing my mind, man, and John Gruden would say. But I'll tell you what,
Ayers would say.
51.5% shooting three-pointer. He's shooting 8 threes a game, and he's putting that team on his back, and his work ethic is unparalleled. There's a good article that ESPN released about puts up 750 shots before practice even starts. So I'll tell you what, watch Oklahoma, because I'll tell you what, it takes good coaching and good point guard and shooting guard play in March, and they have both those.
He hits the he hits these amazing shots, and he's clutch all the time. He knows how to drive to the hoop. He knows how to play defense. Buddy Hield is really the whole package, but I don't think we're seeing the full Denzel Valentine quite yet. And he played really well against Nebraska. He's played really well in another couple games, but he doesn't have that quite edge to drive to the hoop back yet. And I think he might have it back by next month or March, and we'll truly see the Denzel Valentine that we saw at the beginning of the season net that triple-double against KU. He's a great player. Also, Chris Dunn from Providence is another great option.
I mean, this is supposed to be my time to kind of refute what you just said, but I mean, Buddy Hield is just the man. That's the only way I can really say it. I was watching that Kansas game when I was back home in California with my buddies, and we're going crazy on these shots that these guys are hitting. And we wanted him to get the ball more. It was like they would go to him every 3 or 4 possessions, and he put the ball in the hoop, and it's like this guy needs to touch the ball every single time. So his efficiency is incredible. The way he puts the ball in the hoop, he can get to the basket, create his own shot. I really wish I could argue that one, but Buddy for Prez over here right now. That's how I feel.
Not Buddy the Elf either. All right, Matt, you're on the clock.
All right, we touched on this earlier in the show, but I really keep going back to Nebraska ball. This is a better team than we saw in 2014. This team has they don't have the headliner. That Taran Petaway was. Andrew White went for 7 points when Nebraska beat number 11 Michigan State on the road. He fouled out with 7 points. Isn't Andrew White supposed to be the headliner of this team? Nebraska ball is so much more balanced, so much better, and if Tim Miles gets out of his own way, I think Tim Miles is a great coach, but if he gets out of his own way, the sky's the limit for this team. I think they're going to blow out Michigan tomorrow, and I think they're going to go to West Lafayette and give Purdue a great game next Saturday.
They're riding this emotional high right now, and it was great to see him pull off another victory against Michigan State last night. I think Michigan's going to be another test tomorrow. I think that's just we're going to see what the Huskers are made out of. They have a lot more balance. They got a lot more guys that can do a lot of stuff on the court. They got guys that can actually shoot from downtown now. That has been a big problem the last few years. So I think they can kind of build on this momentum tomorrow. I don't know if an NCAA tourney bid is still in the works. Maybe more of maybe the NIT is more of a realistic goal. But they're starting to get better, starting to play with more confidence, and I think that's a big key. Really curious to see how it goes against Michigan tomorrow.
I'll tell you what, I'm not ready to say that this team is better than the 2014 team, but I'll tell you what, you're right, though. It is more balanced. We have more three-point shooters, and we have, people step up when, Andrew White's only putting up 7 points. But let me tell you what, I think we'll put up a good game against Michigan. I think Michigan pulls away at the end of the last 2 minutes. Not to take a step back, but I really think Purdue's going to crush Nebraska. And the only reason why I say that, They have Caleb Swanigan, he was a top 10 recruit last year. He's 6'10". A.J. Hammonds, 7 foot. Isaac Haas, I think he's 7'2", something ridiculous like that. The size, I mean, you can be 6'7", but again, I don't know how they're going to be able to handle all the post play that Purdue brings to the table. But Purdue's guards haven't been producing. But I honestly, I picked Purdue by about 18, 20 points in that game.
That is all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael, our awesome guest host in the studio. Yay!
Really appreciate it.
Really quick, Scotty just texted me and said, "Go Broncos! I need this for my 30 for 30 special. Cheer for the Broncos."
We're all awaiting Scotty's 30 for 30 special on the great Peyton Manning. He'll talk like John Gruden in it. He'll be a great producer. We'll be back next Friday at 1 p.m. on KRNU2. Till then, enjoy your weekend and go Big Red.
Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Kick off your weekend with hard-hitting sports talk every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 on KRNU2.